Why are you introducing SB 89?
SB 89 would really put some criteria on how we name public properties. And my concern has been in the past that politicians will name buildings after fellow politicians or political supporters, and there really hasn't been a mechanism of what really deserves the name on a public building. So the bill would actually make us take a look at this and really take a look at who deserves recognition by the taxpayers of a public building. And let's get some historical perspective behind these decisions instead of just making these names up and who might have political connections and put our names on sides of buildings. Let's have some historical perspective and have some gravitas behind these decisions in the long run.
Yeah, I've done a number of these stories. I've called them monuments to me. It's because there's just something that seems unseemly about a politician who's already currently in office, not retired. If he's retired, passed away, it's one thing. But a politician who's sitting in office, there just seems to be an inherent conflict there.
Absolutely, and I think what we need to take a look at is what is the impact over the long haul that these community leaders have, be it they politicians, be it that they local advocates within a community that's doing a lot of good work. There are a lot of people in New Mexico who are doing a lot of good work. We don't need to be naming our buildings just after the politicians that have the ability to write their own laws and name a building after themselves or their political supporters. Let's let history decide and let the people of New Mexico actually have some common sense on who we're naming and honoring in these manners.
Now, Senator Boitano has introduced this, I believe, twice before, never got out of committee. What makes you think that yours might be able to?
Well, in the past, the bills, people like to control these bills and tie them up in committee, and I hope eventually we'll get this out of committee because it does make a lot of sense that we just shouldn't be tying these bills and naming these buildings after our political supporters, after ourselves. It's just not right. We really need to be looking at what is wrong with naming a building after the agency that's in the building so the public actually knows what happens in that building. Why not call it the Department of Education building and people know that's where the Department of Education business is being operated. So I think there's a lot of common sense to this instead of just naming buildings after political supporters.
And this is something that's stuck in your craw for a while now, right?
I actually was, when I was a young kid coming out of college, worked for the General Services Department with the state of New Mexico, and it's something that we looked at way back then, is making sure we're not just doing this willy-nilly in the past. So this is something that now that I'm a senator I want to introduce and bring some common sense, good government operations to New Mexico.
Last question for you. What would you say to someone who says, well, for example, Pete Domenici, he did a fantastic job for New Mexico, and the court building was named after him in his last couple of years of office. What's wrong with that?
Again, when we have major players in New Mexico, people who have had a body of work that is worthy of distinction, let's take a look at their overall body of work throughout history. And the only way to really be able to tell that is by having that historical perspective. Instead of the politician who's actually controlling the purse strings, being able to name buildings after themselves. So let's let a cooling off period, an equation where something to equate it to, this process, what we could equate it to, is such as the Baseball Hall of Fame. You have to be retired for 5 years before you go onto the ballot, because then the voters of the Hall of Fame can actually take a look at your body of work during your career, not just because you happen to have a great season. Let's take a look at the body of work that these public servants are doing for New Mexico in a historic perspective before we slap names on buildings.
Right.